Hi folks, this is Iqbal with NVIDIA Weekly Analysis and Assessment. In this video, we'll take a look how NVIDIA performed last week versus our expectations that I posted in my previous video. And also, I will give you my assessment for this week regarding NVIDIA stock price. I will share with you 4 data points to support my assessment. Now, let's get started. So last week, if you take a summary of last 5 days, you see Nvidia went up about 3.41%. So Nvidia is trading around 116.65 as of Friday last week. And year to date, Nvidia is still down about 15.66%. So last week, NVIDIA performance versus my assessment in my previous video that I posted 1 week ago over the weekend. I had my assessment that NVIDIA would close positive by the end of this week compared with the 1 week prior. So you see that NVIDIA closed 3.41% up versus 1 week prior. So my assessment was right. Another assessment I had in my previous video that Nvidia should be trading above 120 before the next earnings. So Nvidia next earning is on 5/28, so we still have about 2 weeks to go. So in next 2 weeks, Nvidia still has a chance to go another 5 to 6% from here. And also you see that in last 2 to 3 weeks, Nvidia got the positive momentum and the volatility came down in last few weeks. Let me share with you a very important data. Let's take a look. Now I'm gonna share with you this data. This could be very helpful for you guys. So in this table on the left side and also in this graph, I captured the volatility for Nvidia a week over week. I use the standard deviation to make the assessment for the volatility of Nvidia week over week. So starting from September, I guess. Yes, starting from August 2024 till 9th May 2025, that was the Friday last week. I captured the data and calculated the standard deviation week over week, and I plotted in this chart. You see that last year, August, September, October, November, we don't see much volatility, but all of a sudden, starting January, you see such a high volatility here. And also in this area, you see more volatility. But last few weeks, you see the volatility is going down, and that's a good sign. So this also tells that in last few weeks, Nvidia stock price was trying to be more stabilized. So as of this point, more stability versus February or March this year. So another event that happened last week was the FOMC meeting and the Fed rate cut decision. So Fed did not do any rate cut last week, and that is in line with our expectation. So even if they did not do the rate cut, but at the same time they did not raise a big concern regarding the economy. So their messaging was mixed. So their overall message was mixed, and they are more relying on the future data to do the rate cut. So basically, they are on the wait and watch kind of situation. Now, let's try to make an assessment for NVIDIA for this week, how NVIDIA can perform. So first data point, let's take a look economic data that gonna be released this week. So as you see in this week, we have the CPI or the inflation data coming, and that would be very important. On Wednesday, nothing much. Thursday, weekly initial jobless claim that could be somewhat important, and also the PPI data That's an important data as well. And Friday, we have nothing much. So Tuesday and Thursday are very important. So that would set the tone for Nvidia to close by the end of this week. But overall, I think that CPI data would come in line with the forecast. The core CPI data year over year forecast is 2.8% versus the previous actual was 2.8%. And the CPI year over year 2.3% forecast versus 2.4%. So basically, the forecast is down versus the actual for last month. So that's a good sign. So, but if the actual CPI data comes higher than 2.3%, that then you would see market under pressure and Nvidia to go down. So let's assume that CPI actual would come in line with the forecast. If that happens, that would be a good sign. The first data point is telling this week NVIDIA should get positive momentum or should carry the positive momentum. Another data point for this week is the tariffs deal. As we noticed that US and UK has reached a tariff deal last week, but if this week if the Trump administration announces another trade deal with any important country, that would be a positive indicator for the overall market and also Nvidia. And also, if they provide a positive developments regarding the negotiation between the US and China trade deal this week, then that could be also a positive indicator. So US and China is still in the process of talking on the tariff deal, but no resolution yet. But I'm hoping by the end of this week we might see some positive development. And the third data point for this week is NVIDIA earnings. Even if NVIDIA earnings is due 2 weeks from now, but you can still see some news coming regarding NVIDIA earnings by the end of this week. So, looking at the historical data regarding the NVIDIA earnings, in the last cycle, the earning projection was 0.84 and NVIDIA actuals came 0.89, the earnings per share. And that was a positive surprise of about 6%. For this quarter, the forecast is 0.89. So if we compare with the last quarter, the actuals came 0.89. So I think that meeting the 0.89 or exceeding the 0.89 forecast won't be very difficult for Nvidia. But the catch for this earnings should be the profit margin and the earnings forecast for the next quarter. Because if you take a look, AMD was also able to beat the earnings, but they took a hit, $1.5 billion reduction. Okay, so that kind of hit Nvidia can also announce this due to restriction regarding their advanced chips to China. And the fourth data point that I'm going to use in this analysis is the technical charts. So you see on your screen 180-day hourly interval chart and also the Fibonacci levels. The next level of resistance based on the Fibonacci is 118.58 and that reflects a 50% retracement from the all-time high. And I'm guessing that Nvidia should be able to break 119 level sometime this week. It tried to break a 119 level last week, but it could not sustain because 119 is a good resistance level. So it won't be easy for Nvidia to break 119 in just one attempt. So, but I'm guessing Nvidia should get more momentum after the CPI data if the CPI data comes lower than the forecast or could come in line with the forecast. But before that, Nvidia, even if it gets momentum, won't go too high before the CPI data. And the lower side, you see the next level of support is 110. So if any negative data comes this week, then Nvidia could also get negative momentum and should go to try 110 level. Okay. And if Nvidia goes up further after getting positive data or positive news this week, then the next level of resistance is 126. I'm not expecting Nvidia to touch 126 by the end of this week, but anything could happen, right? Being a realistic analyst, I'm guessing Nvidia should be trading between 118 and 126 by the end of this week. And regarding the MACD chart, you see Nvidia entered in the negative region at this point below the zero level, but this negative momentum that Nvidia carried on Friday in afternoon is not very strong. Okay, so it's not very steep. So this tells that even if Nvidia goes down a little bit more, but it should get some positive recovery, so that's what I think looking at the MACD chart. So this concludes my analysis and assessment for this week. And regarding the assessment for this week, I shared with you 4 data points. And in summary, most of the data points suggest that Nvidia should carry the positive momentum and should close positive by the end of this week versus 1 week prior. But if any unexpected event happens or some negative data gets released this week, then that could also bring Nvidia down. But chances of that happening is low in my opinion. I hope you liked the video. Thank you so much for watching. Talk to you more in the next video. Take care.